Again, I just want to say hi to everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Stephanie Waller. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the program director at Grantmakers for Education. On behalf of our entire team, I'd like to welcome you to our program today, Relationship as Revolution to Support Youth Thriving. I also want to thank our co-sponsors for today's program, Trust for Learning and the Early Childhood Funders Collaborative. And we just want to acknowledge and thank folks for being on with us today on the eve of the 2024 election to be in community. Really top of mind for the team at Ed Funders is a big question about what education for a thriving democracy looks like in and beyond elections. And what is the charge for philanthropy at a time where so many aspects of democracy are being challenged? We know that really critical to a thriving democracy is a quality education system for all learners, inclusive of all the places and spaces where learning happens, that considers, celebrates, and allows for learners of all ages to show up in the fullness of their identity, to be seen and known, to be safe, and to have the resources and supports they need to learn, grow, and thrive. And relationships are really significant resources in and of themselves that help create those conditions that learners need to thrive. And I'm really honored that we are joined today by a phenomenal panel of expert practitioners and educators to dig more into what relationship building and sustaining work looks like, as well as what funders need to know in this moment about how they show up to support and sustain education practitioners in the relationship work that they're doing. We want to be in conversation with you this afternoon, so we invite you to engage, respond, reflect, ask questions throughout today's program in the chat. And without further ado, I want to kick it to the folks that we have assembled to get us started. So I'm going to hand things over to Ellen Roche, Chief Media and Philanthropy Officer and Co-Director at Trust for Learning. Welcome, Ellen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie. It's really good to see friends in the chat. Good to be with you all virtually, and I'm so excited about this conversation. My job right now is to introduce you to Lucy, who is really a dear friend and colleague to me personally, and our moderator and host for today's discussion. And I have an official bio for Lucy, which I will share, but I have to just give my own spin on it, which is that I met Lucy, or I was in Lucy's presence for the first time at an event at New America in, I think, late 2018 or early 2019. And Lucy was on this panel at this event, and I was so blown away, Lucy, by your perspective, by the way that you shared your perspective, by the call to action. And some of the things I remember in that conversation were about how do we support practitioners, educators, in the early childhood world to get to policy tables, right? Like first identifying where are those policy tables, where they are missing, how do we get them there strategically? How do we support them to be there? Both behind the scenes and in very practical terms. So Lucy, you are one of my heroes. Very, very grateful to you for facilitating us in this conversation and grateful to be in relationship with you. And so let me give you a little bit more about Lucy's background. So for more than 15 years, Lucy has been working on campaigns, programs, and system change, all related to education policy, and particularly around shaping kind of public understanding, big narratives around how we transform systems in education. I see you, Lucy, and I know you self-identify as a community organizer. You have tons of experience as a strategist, and you think a lot about how to mobilize resources. Lucy's passion is fueled by creating safe and affirming spaces where the expertise and the experiences of people who are directly impacted by our nation's education policy and systems are the ones driving equity and bringing that power into conversations at all of these tables. Interestingly, her work is also informed by training in embodied practice, so like somatic, sort of centered and healing-centered education work. And she's really an advocate for the connection between individual healing, what do we each need to sort of be in our bodies and heal and practice that, and collective thriving and healing. Lucy is the co-founder of Third Bloom Consulting. So she's working with various people through this social impact firm, national, state, and local levels, doing strategy work, co-creating, and working on services and products that really improve the well-being of leaders, teams, and learning communities in the education space, both in the early childhood world and K-12. So of course, we've got folks from all of the age ranges developmentally here. So yeah, Lucy, welcome. Thank you. And I will hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you for this opportunity, both you and for us to be gathered here today. I'm so grateful and honored to be in this space. I also want to really acknowledge and appreciate Stephanie for also bringing us together and welcoming us all onto our call today. So again, my name is Lucy Recio. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. And while the need to tend to the state and the fabric of our relationships is an ever-present focus for me, I feel incredibly grateful and honored to be able to explore this in partnership and in community with all of you. But particularly, I am thrilled to be joined in this conversation by two wonderful colleagues. So we are joined today by Marina Rodriguez, who is an organizer of women and children and has spent the past 25 years working directly with families, children, and family child care educators, really to ensure that she is purposefully supporting them in providing rich, responsive, child-centered, culturally and developmentally appropriate practices and environments for children. She is currently the education mentor coach in the technical assistance team at All Our Kin, where she supports new and experienced staff to manage in the work with family child care from a deeply relational and reflective space. We're also joined by Marcus Rother, who is a father, a husband, a career educator, and also a youth and community advocate, as well as a veteran in public education, having spent 8 years in the classroom and 9 as a high school administrator, most recently as a director of youth development at Sacramento City Unified School District. Marcus currently serves as the executive director of Mentor California, which is the California affiliate of Mentor, the national partnership, which is unifying national champion for expanding quality mentoring relationships for young children. Marina, Marcus, thank you so much for sharing this space alongside me today. So I actually want to start us off with something that is deeply important for me, which are words, right? I know that words are significant in terms of how they allow us to make sense of the world and also how they orient us in how we exist and are able to just make meaning. And I want to kick off our conversation by getting a better understanding of how you each think about the word relationship, and also what role does that word and concept have in your life? Specifically, what's behind your vision and also your practice of relationship building? Marina, why don't you kick us off with your response?
Ooh, thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Grantmakers for Education, the Trust for Learning, for the opportunity to be in this time and virtual presence with all of you, and really for investing in this generative dialogue too. Marcus, thank you for being in community. When I think about the word relationship, I can't help but think about my personal experience, right? The messages that I received as I grew up, the relationships that I had in my family of origin as contributors to how I see and think and fit into relationships or not. And those relationships, they come with many stories. Some were complex, some were joyful ones, some were sad ones. When I think about relationships at work, in my workspace, I think about them really openly. I think that relationships are not prescriptive. And I think about, how do I know myself? How do I ensure that I am in a deep, trusting relationship with self? And I know the ins and outs of who I am, so that I can also honor the full spectrum of the person that's in front of me. And that's it takes skill, it takes practice, it takes time, it takes space to really honor ourselves, because it really goes against the messages that we've gotten from dominant culture about who we are in the spaces that we inhabit. I'm gonna stop there.
Thank you. I appreciate and love that so much, Marina, right? There's this notion both that it's not prescriptive, and also that it is so deeply informed by who we are, by how we've been raised, by the other relationships, right, that we hold with each other, that therefore informs how we show up. Marcus, I'm curious to hear how you would approach and answer this question about what exactly it is that is guiding and informing your practice and engagement with relationship and relationship building.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I want to first say, Lucy and Marina, it's great to be in space with you all. Grantmakers for Education, Trust for Learning. So excited to be a part of this very important discussion, because I think the piece that we miss around relationships is really how important it actually is. We often say it, but we often don't lean into it enough to really give it, I believe, the respect that it deserves. We as a team at Mentor California, and even when I was in the education space in public schools for 20 plus years, we always wanted to get people to understand that it is about connection first. So when I think about this word relationship, I immediately think about the word connection, right? And we often want to find ourselves in a place where we can get people to understand that it's connection before content. We may go into workshops, we may go into classrooms, we may even be working with our team, but we haven't built a connection yet that allows them to be able to hear or receive the content that we are attempting to give. So we want people to think about this word relationship in terms of connection, so that it makes sense for folks to really understand that we aren't talking about friendships. So I remember this with my teachers for many, many years, is that my teachers would lean in and often say, well, I'm not trying to be their friends, right? And I would always say, it's not about friendships, it's about relationships. And the difference in the two is really thinking about how connection will allow for us to understand young people as well as adults and their stories. I'm a freedom writer teacher. So I've been working with Aaron Gruelle for 20 plus years. And one of the things that we lean into very heavy is the fact that everyone has a story. And relationship allows us to be able to hear, understand, empathize with people and their stories. So we really want to help people get connected in that way, so that relationship can then form and then really be able to allow us to support each other in a very impactful and loving way. The last thing I'll say is, in terms of vision, I started a hashtag years ago and really working with my team called Life Data Matters. And this was really an opportunity for us to, one, help funders, help teachers, adults understand that young people are coming into space with stories. They are real life human beings who have been through some stuff. Right. And if we don't connect to that part of them first, it's going to be really hard for us to be able to get them to understand why math is important, or language arts is important, or just attending school is important, and even just really being able to grab a hold of how they can learn about themselves. So getting folks to understand the importance of life data in understanding a story first, connection before content, is what's really important for our work at Mentor California, my work as an educator, and really just being able to travel and storytell and love on people in a very, very important way. So I'll stop there, because I know we have a lot more to discuss, and we could go on for days, but that's a beautiful question. I appreciate you, Lucy.
Of course, no, and I'm so thankful for how you both have responded to this, right? Because it marries so well, this personal and also what happens when we exist with community with others, right? In community with others. You talk, Marcus, about connection, right? Marina, you talk about experiences. And our conversation really made me think about this quote from therapist, somatics practitioner, political organizer, and writer Frances Hempel, who says, skillful relationships are the bridge between our individual transformation and systemic transformation. And if navigated well, our relationships become a powerful foundation for the liberation we seek to create. And I know that each of you has both been nurtured and reaped by rewards that come from anchoring in the kinds of revolutionary relationships Prentice speaks of. I'd love to hear a little bit more about these conditions, right, that are necessary for that kind of connection to happen that you alluded to, Marcus, for the fact that it is important to be able to practice and exercise, right, the kinds of skills that you both mentioned and that we know are so critical to developing relationships. So, what contributes to creating the conditions where you can practice and exercise these skills in yourself and also with young people? Marcus, why don't you kick us off this time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful. I love what you said in terms of creating the conditions, right? For us to feel like we have a space where we can connect in a really special way. You know, it's interesting. We often tell adults that the most important thing to do in this work with young people is to build relationships. But what we don't often do is teach adults how to build relationships. I know adults who are fantastic math teachers, but they are horrible at connecting with young people. So you may go into their classroom and you may not experience what feels like a very joyful experience for young people because that adult understands how to get them to do math, but has yet understood how to be able to connect with them as human beings. What we often do in this work is that we spend a lot of time programming, funding, creating opportunities for young people to be able to thrive and be great. We forget that we continue to put adults who are not healed, who still haven't recognized their own triggers, who still haven't connected to themselves in a way, right? I'm 49 years old. I'm learning 49-year-old me all as a brand new person. My body is different. There are things that my mind wants to do, but my body says no, right? I have to learn and connect to this person now in a very different way, right? I have to find a way to be able to understand, okay, 49-year-old Marcus, like, this is what we're going to do today because this is what feels better for me now. 39-year-old me was a completely different me, 29, 19, and so on and so forth. So if we don't spend enough time being able to help adults be able to connect, being able to help adults understand what skills actually do build relationships, how can we expect them to build relationships? And some of those skills are very simple, right? Knowing a young person's name for real. I can't tell you how many adults and young people I can ask this very simple question. How many of you went through school and you know that there was a teacher that never knew your name? There are people right now who are watching this who are shaking their head. Yeah, yep, I've been that person. I've been that person. Or consistently got my first or last name wrong, right? If we don't understand the importance of someone's name as a relationship skill, how are we going to be able to build and connect with them in a very, again, loving? You will hear me continue to say this. Bell Hooks and James Baldwin are my favorite authors. It speaks for itself. Love, love, love. And part of that is understanding who people are. But we have to be able to connect with adults and be able to help them understand who they are first so that they can be their best selves for young people as we continue to go through this work. And then we can create, to your point, Lucy, those conditions, right? So as a high school administrator, as a high school principal leaning into this space, the first 2 weeks of school, we didn't open academic books. We're going to build connections. We're going to have DJs in the hallway. We're going to dance with each other. If you're an adult working with young people, learn how to do the wobble. Like, don't stand on the side. If the young people, and I'm saying the wobble, that's probably like 14 dance things removed because there's so many new ones coming out, line dances coming out, but learn how to do those things so you can go out and have fun, right? Making room for fun and play to be able to get connected to young people in a very special way.
I love that, right? And this centering of both notions like love and joy and fun, right? And something that you mentioned, Marcus, is so deep and near to my heart. It's the fact that there are so many of us that have not been able or have not been called, right, and invited to do that healing work, right? To really come and understand ourselves so that we know and we can better come into understanding that if we don't tend to what is happening internally, we run the risk of recreating a lot of the same harm that we say that we're supposed to be fighting against or that we're working against, right? And so I love this notion of you have to think about yourself, right? You have to understand yourself. We have to create environments where people, especially the adults, feel comfortable enough to investigate, like, hey, what is happening and what's occurring internally? And how is that then manifesting in the work that I'm trying to do with young people? And I'm curious, Marina, as you are sitting with this, right? Like your work is primarily with other adults, right? These are primarily women who are responsible and working every single day to create these different kinds of environments for young children. And so I'd love to hear what are some of the things that really stand out to you as necessary to create the conditions for the kind of thriving, supportive relationships that we've been discussing over the course of our conversation so far?
Yeah, thanks, Lucy, for the question, and Marcus, thank you for the depth of your, the everything you brought to the space. So much of it resonated with me. I just want to shout out, right, Prentice, because their work is so inspiring. One of the phrases that they use in their book, "What It Takes to Heal," is transitional characters. And so, for those of you who may have not gotten a chance to read their work yet, transitional characters are people like us in community doing this healing work ourselves so that we are interrupting intergenerational trauma, so that we are showing up in our organizations, in our communities, in our families in a different way, in a more healed and in a more attuned, in a more honoring way of ourselves and ourselves who we've been before all the adversity we experience in life. And so when I think of what the quote that you opened up with Prentice, when I think about their work and how much they've learned from these therapeutic spaces, I think that there is so much for us to learn from that psychological world, right? The world of therapy that I know that even more these days are leaning into relationship as the agent of change. And so I'm gonna get to what you asked me specifically, but I'll share a little bit about how I grew up in a very insecure on many levels. And I had insecure attachment, insecure in my community, just insecure in different spaces of my life, and not even understanding the power of my voice. And it was through maturing into a young woman that I became more assertive to the relationships that I developed with mentors and colleagues that saw my strengths and were able to name my strengths. And so I began to really believe in myself. And then I began to really try things out for myself. And I do think that we never stop learning. We never stop growing. We never stop expanding parts of ourselves that can be operating differently. And I believe that there are many ways, lots of ways that we build relational skills. And one of them is to engage in continuous learning. All our Canvas organization that I work at, we are not a perfect organization by all means. We are a learning organization. So we have many, many feedback loops, and we do it in this organic way where something happens, it lands hard for some of us, and we start talking about it, like what did that feel like? That situation that happened, what did it feel like? And we talk about this, and some of us more than others, and I certainly do, right? As a leader, in really embodying somatic practices and embodying what it means to carry healthy relationships, what it means to create environments that are conducive to healing, even within the organization. It's about showing up in those ways, really trying and practicing showing up in those ways, creating the space to talk about it, even when it's hard. Hey, you were engaged in this situation. This is how I perceived it. This is how it landed for me. Tell me what it felt like for you to be in that space, right? When we talk about skills, communication is huge. So many of us, I came from a household where communication was harsh criticism, right? Because I was supported by a single mom who needed to survive and who needed to move her kids along. So she didn't have all the resources to really be super openly communicative and the patience, right? She didn't have any of those things for us. And so she had to cut behaviors, and it came through like harsh criticisms. So I'm saying that I'm sharing a little piece of my story only to say that many of us need to expand the way that we communicate. I think in addition to communication is also trying things out. Just creating a space where we're having these conversations like today, and then going out and trying it out. I think that we all contribute to cultural shifts, right? And we either contribute to a culture that stays the same, or we contribute to a culture that shifts and operate different. Because the more that we can show up to a space where we're actually sensing, I was in a community early this morning of colleagues, a community of practice, and we had a check-in. And the check-in was like, how are you doing? And not how are you doing in this surface level, but how are you doing in like really what's going on? And I didn't realize I was holding so much. And when the question was posed, I began to feel sensations in my belly. I began to feel sensations in my chest. And to be able to say that, this is what my body is sensing right now. This is what I've been carrying. Those are the skills, right? Like those are the skills we want to make not taboo. Those are the skills that we want to ensure that we're creating spaces that are welcoming of them, because then that leads us away from cynicism, right? The rolling of the eyes, the smart remark, because that takes us away from relationship. And being in deep relationship, it means that we get to like truly honor who we are from our body, and how our body operates with our mind and our soul. And I'll wrap up very quickly. I want to shout out AOK. I know some of my colleagues are definitely here. So, and I just want to say that at All Our Kin, we have values, and we embody those values. We show up in those values. And when there's tension with a value, we try as hard as we can to create the space to talk about how that value is not being lived. And so when I work, you mentioned, right, in my intro that I've been working in this work of direct service, work with educators for many years now. And when I show up in a relationship with the educator, I am showing up fully embracing who they are as a human. Because when I show up fully embracing who the educator is as a human, then I'm beginning to create a relational container for learning that allows the shifts to take place. Because when we're working with educators who work with children, and we're not doing the hard work to talk about how they might look at discipline, right? We are affording for some intergenerational trauma to occur there, even with a child that's not even a child in their family, right? So how do I create the conditions to hold the educator fully for the spectrum of the human that they are, so that I can engage in those hard conversations and help them think about what are their beliefs about children, right? What are their inherent beliefs about children? Where did those come from? Because when we create that relational learning container that is relational, responsive, and reflective, then we help an educator truly begin to unpack some of those stories that might be hard. I'm gonna stop there. I know it's hard. Thank you for listening.
Of course, no, this is exactly it, right? Because I think that this is particularly in this moment in time, right, where we know that we are being called, especially as educators, especially as individuals that are mindful about the kind of society that we are a part of, about the kind of society that we wish to create, having these conversations about what it means to welcome someone in the totality of who they are, right? To be able to lean in as opposed to like harden our backs and straighten our spine, getting ready as if we're going to attack, but actually to lean into a space of curiosity, of wonder, of truly inviting people to better understand what it is that they bring into a space, what are the stories that they carry, Marcus, to your point, right? What are the ways in which we are able to find some connection in order to build this bridge between what we think we understand and what we hope to understand, right? And this entire conversation, and especially so much of what you share, Marina, is really making me think about those supports that are necessary, right? Because when you talk about things like communication, the opportunity and the ability to be able to name, that didn't land well on me, to be reflective and to have enough self-awareness to be able to say, maybe I didn't show up in this space in the way that I intended to. Maybe I made a mistake in how I conveyed what I was trying to say. Maybe I caused harm when that was not my intent. Or perhaps my intent was to cause harm. And how do I then hold myself accountable, right? Or how do I create space for others to hold me accountable? And so it makes me think about the fact, to your point, Marcus, that these are skills, right, that need to be developed, that need to be honed. And what we've talked about is the fact that we need space to continually practice them in ways that are affirming, that feel safe, and that allow us to clumsily, as Bayo Kamalafe often says, to clumsily figure it out along the way. And so I'm curious, especially as we sit in this space with so many individuals who are particularly funders that are interested in nurturing more of these kinds of environments, what are the kind of supports that you have seen and experienced that are really impactful in terms of creating these conditions, in terms of creating these relational containers? What are the ways in which the ways that you need and that you have seen support coming in that really addresses the root issues or the root skills, right, that need to be nurtured in order for these kinds of relationships to happen? Marcus, what would you name for some of those? And also, feel free also to share what are some examples of when that has happened, what has resulted when all of that is in place.
Yeah, great. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is we can't continue to ask adults to show up for young people in ways that they just aren't ready or don't know how to do. And we have to, I say this all the time, we have to understand that a teacher, mentor, or coach that is not their own best model is really just a hypocrite with a little bit of dictatorship. And in some way, we have to be able to connect to that in a way that allows us to be able to build healthy adults that can then nurture and connect with young people in a very special way. Part of that has to come from, as a lead administrator, as a director of a school district, I would take my staff on retreats, right? I hired a nutritionist at one point. I hired someone, we worked in a district office with cubicles. Nobody wants to work in cubicles. There's nothing healthy about that, but we keep asking adults to be healthy. So what did we do? We had to figure out what are the type of plants that we can put into these cubicles that will allow for better oxygen, that will make our adults feel better? How do we give them lunch breaks that make sense so that they can finish eating and then go take a walk or find a way to decompress? We have to be okay with asking funders to be able to connect in a way that allows us to do those things. We also have Mentor California, what is called our restoration retreat for our youth, right? We don't want to bring our young people to another conference. We want to bring them to a restoration retreat where we teach them how to nap. We teach them how to do yoga. We do boxing. We bring a chef who can do nutritional smoothies in front of them and show them how to put this together. Those things are the ways that we get folks excited about self and what it means to take care of self so that we can first love us to then love others, right? But funders have to recognize that if you're going to give me funding for this and you're going to ask me for outcomes, the opportunity is the outcome. Nothing else. The opportunity is the outcome. And some of the things that may come from it as an outcome in terms of healthy lifestyle and things of that nature, we may never see in that young person or in that adult for 3, 4, 5 years later. So don't ask me to give it to you in 10 months because it's not going to occur. But the opportunity is going to begin to help them thinking, oh, I actually can't, I'm not doing yoga until I do yoga. I'm not eating a nutritional smoothie until somebody teaches me how to make one that actually tastes good, right? So we have to be okay with recognizing that the opportunity is the outcome. When we begin to create those spaces like that and we are loving on people in a way that they know they are being loved on, they show up for you. Young people showed up for me, right? So when I think about an example of what this looked like, before I became a principal in my high school, I was dean of students. And the principal at the time wanted to get rid of me. We've all possibly heard somebody say that they got fired from a job because we wanted to go another way. Although my evaluation said I was an excellent administrator, the decision was to go another way and bring in someone new. And what was interesting was that my young people said no. So when I came to school on that Monday and found out that I was going to be fired, and young people started a petition, and by 12 o'clock, we had about 1,200 students in our space. By 12 o'clock, over 500 young people had signed a petition saying that they didn't want me to lose my job. Principal calls me in and says, "What's going on, Marcus? Why do we have this petition?" And I said, "Well, you tell me. Young people think I'm going to be fired." Now, let me say, I had not known yet or heard this yet from my actual boss at the time, supervisor at the time. And she hands me my evaluation, which said I'm an excellent administrator, but then also says, yes, we are going to let you go at the end of the year because we want to go another way. Asked me to sign off on it. I refused at the moment because I felt the need to talk to my wife, my partner, and have a conversation about what was occurring. That Monday night, I began to get phone calls, Lucy. You better get ready. The young people not playing. Marcus, I don't know what's going on, but these young people are for real. Got a call from my current supervisor, principal at the time, and said, Marcus, every administrator needs to be at our high school at 6 a.m. We need to be prepared. Do you know about the riot that's supposed to happen? Right? Narrative, words, riot. Let's all pay attention to what's happening. I said, no, I don't. I'm not sure what you're talking about. So I get to school the next day. Those that have worked in the high school, you will know that there's a 1-minute bell to tell young people to go to class. That 1-minute bell rang, and typically in our high school, 98% of young people will go to class. You're going to always have your stragglers, but most went to class. On this Tuesday, they weren't going to class. And I started to think in my head, uh-oh, what's about to happen? Young people walked past me, Marina, and they said, don't worry, Strother, we got you. They don't even understand what's about to happen. The bell rang for those young people to be in class so that they weren't tardy. And out of our 1,200 students, over 700 young people sat down in the middle of the hallway and refused to go to class until I kept my job. Now, I will tell you that this happened for 2 weeks. There were 5 emergency school board meetings because of this. And at the end of it, I ended up keeping my job. I moved up. The principal we had lost her job. And I stayed there for another 9 years. But what was beautiful about this and why I have continued and will always lead in this way is that one young person was interviewed and he was asked, why did you all do this for Mr. Strother? Help us understand. And that young person said, there was no way we were going to let you take the one person who loves us away from us. I knew in that moment that I would always lead with love. I knew that I would always put love at the forefront of all of the work that we continue to do. And when I think about this with our board We start our board meetings with positive Post-it notes. We're not about to just jump into, here's all the stuff Mentor California is doing right now. It's great. No, I care about you. I want to know who you are. I want to understand, as people who are in this body of connecting and relationship work, how I can connect to you best, right? So we lean in that way with our board. I lean in that way with my staff. I don't get off a call with my staff without telling them I love them, right? Any young people that I come in contact with, they're going to continue to hear that work and that love, and they're going to feel it, and they're going to know that this is who I am. So I want funders, I want people to understand that if we want to create spaces and places that are brave and allow us to be able to heal and be connected and have relationship, then stop asking me for outcomes that turn around GPAs in 3 months, because that's not how education works. But I can connect outcomes to opportunities that make young people feel like I matter, so I'm gonna do well in math. I matter, so I'm gonna show up to school because I get it. I matter, so I'm gonna show up for community because I want somebody else to know that they matter. And if we can continue to lean into that without trying to make it about numbers that feel good to present in front of boards or in front of some other stakeholder who wants to hear how your organization is supporting growth, help them understand that the opportunity is the outcome. Creating that so that adults can feel healed and loved, so that they can then go and help heal and love on young people, is what is important about this idea of relationship and how we move.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for such a powerful story, right? There's so much there, so much richness. And I think the main thing that I really want to pull out is this notion and this reality of love as a verb, right? Of love as a vehicle by which one can say, I see you. I am willing to stand in the gap with you. I am willing to create, again, these conditions for your worldview to expand, for your worldview to broaden, that if you have not seen or have not experienced someone who is able to care for you and invest in you, that I am that person, right? And what it takes to be able to build that is time. It takes trust. It takes mutuality. It takes the reality for people to understand that it doesn't happen overnight, right? And so also, doing that work yields the kind of sweet reward that you talked about, right? Not in a self-serving way, but in a just like, this is what it means to create relational tissue between and among us, right? And so, Marina, I'd love to also hear from you, right? There's so much there. And I know that you too are able to share so much as well of like, what are the supports that are necessary to continue to build more and more of these kinds of examples and more of these ecosystems where we can carry out love as a practice and we can yield the kinds of things that we know that transformational relationships can produce, not just amongst adults, but also in service to children.
Yes, I am charged with energy right now. I'm feeling it in my gut, I'm feeling it in my chest. Just want to name that for myself in the space right now. When I was hearing Marcus speak, the beautiful story and everything behind it, it brought me to this idea of the parallel process, right? The parallel process as a significant source of transformation. So Marcus shows up for his community of adult learners in this way, and the adult learners are able to show up in reciprocity to the children that they're caring for, the youth that they're caring for. And I think that if we level up that, we can think about funders also showing up in these ways that are healthy ways of being in relationship and responsive in relationship, so that we stay in, to use your word, in that ecosystem that creates healing spaces. And we know that research has helped us learn that the more informal a space is, the more we learn from it, right? Because relationships are the driver of that of creating the conditions to really learn and undo and try ways of being that are really different from how we've known to be in relationship. And it's really the organicness of the relationship that really it takes time to build. So like I said earlier, relationships are not prescriptive. And when I think about what this might mean for a funder, I think funders have the opportunity to build their own relationships with the organizations that they're supporting. I think funders have an opportunity to co-create, to truly co-create, not surface co-create, but co-create by being in a relationship with organizations that are doing the work and with individuals that are doing the work, and that they can understand firsthand that relationships cannot be rushed, that relationships take their own time to flourish, and they're not uniform. Not one relationship or line of relationships are uniform. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for all of us to show up different, to show up in a way that pushes on the status quo. Because we may all get off this call and go back to the next thing, but you have the opportunity to do something different. I think when I think of funders have a lot of power and a lot of influence, right, in different spaces. And so how are you using that power to really be creating healing in community? And the other thing, Marcus shared his beautiful story, and it made me think about how at All Our Kin, we do direct coaching. So we have pillars in our work. And one of our pillars is coaching, and we coach in the business area so we can strengthen family childcare programs so they're sustainable, so that there's slots for children, right? And that families can count on and come and bring their children to safe programs that have their utmost best interest in mind. And then we do educational coaching, but educational, I want you to think about holistic education, not an academic focus, a holistic education that truly takes the full family, the child into account, and that educator. And in order for coaches to go out and to be in community with educators, they also need their community of support. So at All Our Kin, we offer mentor coaching. And so there's a mentor coach that meets, and it's not time, right? It's not restricted by time. This is a long-term relationship that the mentor coach has with the coach that creates a healing space for the coach. So when the coach is ready to go out into the program and hold what they need to hold for the educator and with the educator, they can come into it replenished because someone is holding them. And so there's an opportunity there for funders too to really look at how organizations are creating healing spaces for the people that are doing this really hard work of transformative outcomes. Because when we say transformative outcomes, right, like we want this, Marcus was saying this earlier, like don't focus on the outcome, the opportunity is the outcome. For us, the change in the transformation happens in the process of the relationship, right? That I interpret as the opportunity that Marcus talks about. The change is not about the end, it's about what's happening along the line. See if I'm missing anything else.
Yes, absolutely, right? This notion about the process, right? What emerges. I love this idea also of how we hold one another. This charge, Marina, that you started of, once we leave this space today, how are we thinking about the way in which we are in relationships with one another, how we're holding space for one another, how we're supporting one another, and in a way that is not transactional, right? But just going back to what we started this all with, I see you, I'm here for you. I am willing to stand in the gap with and for you, right? So that in doing that, we can create a different kind of existence, a different kind of dynamic, a different kind of power play, right? That is at hand, so that we can see one another as truly being capable and able of producing and yielding and showing so much out of ourselves, and also what we bring to this table, right? That there is an opportunity for us to truly see and be with one another. And in doing that, then how that allows for the kind of transformation that we seek. Friends, it's hard to believe, but we have reached the end of our time together. And before we close out, I know that it is a practice that is really important for me to just offer the invitation of what is one thing that you would be remiss if you walk away from this conversation without saying. So, what's that one thing that you want to make sure you leave folks who are both present here today, but also that will be watching the recording, um, for them to sit with, for them to wrestle with, and for them to also continue to put into practice after our time together? Marcus, why don't you start off, and then Marina, you can close us out.
Yes, I just want to say first and foremost, this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be in space with you all. Just really great dialogue overall. I would say this: be intentional with your thoughts and your questions. I will lean into this very simple notion of how are you doing? We often ask that question without really caring about how someone's doing. And I encourage you to begin to start asking the question, how are you feeling? And allowing people to be able to share with intentionality. It is important for us to think about young people and adults in a way that recognizes that they have a story and that they are showing up in some way, right? One of the things that I've always hated is the notion of you got to leave your personal at the door. Like, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. Like, life is happening, so please don't ask me to do that. But if you want to try to support me in some way, great. If not, like, allow me to be in whatever it is that I'm going through. So I would just say be intentional with your thoughts and your questions, because it is important. And in some ways, the last question I would always ask you to ask yourself is, what is it that needs attention from you right now? Sometimes when you get triggered, sometimes when things are happening for you, something is asking for your attention. What exactly is that? I still have to do that with my 3 own biological children who are 24 and 19, and I have twins. In case you're like, that was only 2 ages, I have twins who are 19. And they make things show up for this 49-year-old body sometimes that I have to ask, what needs my attention right now? So be intentional with your thoughts and your questions. Thank you, Lucy. You've been fantastic.
Well,
You as
thank
well,
you.
Marina.
Thank you so much. I love that. Be intentional with your words, with your questions, truly asking and creating space of how are you feeling, right? And to sit with, I'm going to create space to hear what your response will be, right? I often tell people, how are you doing? But really, how are you doing? I'm willing to answer. I'm willing to wait for your answer. Marina, what about you? What's the thing that you would love to leave folks with before we close out?
Yeah, well, I also want to say thank you so much again for the space, for all the contributors to this space, and Marcus and Lucy, I take your wisdom with me. One of the things that that we see time and again is that the inadvertent changes that happen in the family child care educator around their confidence. We see that their confidence grows so deeply every time. Like, I worked with an educator whom I started coaching around, holistic practices with children, and she just began to believe in herself so much that right now she's leading a grassroots organization, leading her own workshops for her own educators in her own community, and helping people get accredited and licensed. And in this developing of this confidence happens in this really intimate, in a real healthy way, relationship. Educators begin to believe in themselves. And when they believe in themselves, they also begin to believe in the families in their program. They begin to believe in the children. I've done this for so long, shoulder to shoulder, in so many capacities, and I noticed a transformation around confidence and humility time and again, a deep, genuine belief in themselves, which for me indicates that when they're having these deep beliefs in themselves, they actually are reaching an expansion of themselves. It's an expansion of themselves. And we know that when someone believes in themselves, they begin to have and foster a positive image of themselves, they can share that forward. And they begin to have positive images and help young people, help children, infants, toddlers, preschoolers begin to have and develop positive images of in themselves. And so I'll leave you with this quote by this amazing pioneer in reflective practice, Jerry Paul, who says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto others. Do unto others as you would have them do unto others," which means, right, we're going to be in this community of reciprocity, and I am going to meet you in seeing you in your full spectrum and honoring who you are, and also leaving pieces of me with you so that those can serve in the future. And I'll stop there.
I love that, Marina. I love that. And again, I can tell that we could spend so much time continuing this conversation, but I'm gonna take the liberty of picking up that last bit, right? Leaving pieces of ourselves so that then it can continue to move forward with others, right? That powerful ripple effect that we know is so present and so promising for those of us who exist in educational spaces. And so I hope that for all of you who have joined us today, there are pieces of what we have shared that are pieces of us, of how we show up in this work, of how we do this work, that will imprint on each of you and that you will carry also as you move this work forward. Marina, Marcus, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for being such incredible stewards and also guides of this work, and also the relationships that you hold and nurture in your respective spaces and spheres of influence. I am so deeply honored and humbled to be doing this work alongside you. I am now going to turn it over to Ellen to close us out. Thank you all so much. And of course, let's keep the conversation going. I hope you are well. You take good care of yourselves. And let's continue again to do this work in better relationship with one another, holding one another, loving one another, and healing one another. Ellen?
Lucy, Marina, Marcus, thank you. I'm just sort of basking in your dialogue and really, really grateful. I will just share a 30-second snapshot from Pittsburgh, where I am right now, where I have come as essentially a stranger to knock on people's doors and ask if they have what they need to vote. And every time I do it, I feel some dread. I'm like, nobody wants some random person knocking on their door, right? And every time I do it, I am filled with so much hope for the kind of larger values of our democracy that I know we are orienting toward, despite the fact that we've never had them in this country. And listening to all of you and just the experiences I've been having here in Pennsylvania, this idea that trust and relationships are really the building block of everything we want on this land in this country. And it's not going to be a top-down process to get to democracy, right? So building these relationships, forging these communities with each other, I think is the path. And just saying, I'm feeling a lot of hope, and a lot of people still need help to get out to the polls. So if anybody has time to pick up the phone, call people, yeah, it's logistics. People need rides to the polls. People need childcare. People need to know where to vote. So just putting that out there as a final plug for how to be in relationship as we work toward these ideals. And Stephanie, I think you will officially close us out with reminders, but just thank you, Lucy, Marina, Marcus.
Yes, I just want to echo those thanks to all of our speakers today, and to follow Marcus's lead around like how I'm feeling. I'm feeling full. I'm feeling inspired and really energized, frankly, and like really motivated by the conversation that happened today. And I think it came right on time for me. So thank you all again for being here. By way of some final announcements, we would love to continue the conversation with you around um, learning and emotions and love and how to show up and all of those things. We, of course, love for you all to stay connected with us. So we will make sure to make the recording from today's conversation available in about a week. We'll circulate it out and also post it to our YouTube channel. And then we've got some additional programming happening to round out the year. So the final webinar in this series with Trust for Learning and Early Childhood Funders Collaborative will be happening on December 5th, where we'll dig into social emotional learning and children's development and talk about resilience. And then we're going to be having a couple conversations about making sense of the election and what's happening next. We'll also be in conversation in late November around education policy and what the next steps are for funders, how funders are making sense of that. So we definitely hope that you'll join us at a future program. But thank you for being here today. Thank you again to Lucy, Marcus, and Marina, to Ellen. And we just hope that you all have a great rest of your week. Take care.